They vaporized the entire base with a smile, then laughed when the scanners said, "No life detected." What the scanners missed was Cryopod X7, buried under 30 feet of collapsed steel and ice, quietly rebooting and counting down. The snowstorm howled over the mountain range like a creature in pain, chewing up the sky and spitting frost across the half-buried installation below. The Zarvek shuttle cut through the blizzard with calculated precision, anti-grav stabilizers humming as it touched down on what used to be Earth's North Star forward operating base. To the Draxi command, it was just a clean-up job. No resistance. No survivors. Just a frozen human tomb waiting to be burned out of history. A team of 6 elite alien soldiers disembarked with practice flare, armored in shimmering biosuits that distorted the light and puffed steam as their internal temperatures adjusted to the earth cold. Sergeant Schrahl grunted as his feet hit the icy surface. He tapped his neurocom and barked orders through clenched fangs. Each soldier broke off toward their assigned sectors with the efficient boredom of seasoned warriors who hadn't seen a real fight in months. They came for the black box data, for whatever outdated weapon blueprints were left to scavenge, and to destroy the rest. But mostly, they came because erasing human remnants was good for morale back home. One of them, Krell, stopped to kick a charred helmet half-frozen into the snow. He flipped it over with his boot, revealing the ghost of a once-human faceplate cracked down the middle. "Primitive monkeys," he chuckled. "Built all this just to lose it." "Careful," another teased through comms. "You sound nostalgic." "Please. I'm just hungry. These things remind me of crunchy snacks." Inside the base, they began their sweep. The outer corridors were dead. Lifeless. No power, no heat, no traps. The Draxi walked through fallen beams and crumpled support walls like tourists in a ruined museum. Then came the comms ping, faint, low-frequency, strange. Something under sublevel 9 still pulsed. Schrahl narrowed his eyes at the readout. "Environmental malfunction," he said with zero conviction. "Send Valrek to check it." Valrek, the tech specialist with a bad habit of humming off-key Earth songs, rolled his compound eyes and made his way into the dark. As he climbed down through the shattered elevator shaft, he kept talking to himself. "Imagine getting buried in this dump. Couldn't be me. If I die, I want to explode in orbit, full dramatic finish." He stopped talking when his feet touched ice instead of metal. His scanner blinked erratically. The ice was radiating. Not naturally. Something below was generating low, rhythmic pulses. Heat. Controlled. He pressed forward, pushing through a warped corridor now frozen shut with permafrost. When he cut through the last layer, he stepped into a long-forgotten chamber, completely untouched by the scavenging fire that had scorched the rest of the base. At the center was a single cryopod. The lights were dim, but functional. Frost coated the glass from the inside out, except for one eerie smear, a handprint from within. Valrek stepped closer, breath fogging the air. The pod's ancient display flickered to life, struggling against decades of disuse. Earth text scrolled across the cracked screen, auto-translating into Draxi glyphs. Life signs active. Cryosleep stability, marginal. Subject classification, Black Omega. Access level, redacted. Subject alias, Warden. He frowned. "Warden? What kind of idiot name is?" Then the pod hissed. Outside, Schrahl's comm crackled. "Valrek? Report." "Nothing. Just static." "Valrek, respond." Still nothing. Schrahl cursed and marked the location. "Recon team, regroup on sublevel 9. I want visuals and body count." From above, one of the squad cracked a joke. "Think he slipped and broke his neck? Or maybe he met a ghost," said another, laughing. Back in the chamber, the pod's systems whirred louder now. Inside, the figure inside twitched once, then again. A muffled, guttural breath fogged the glass. The temperature dropped 5 degrees in a flash. Then the lights above flickered and exploded. Warden opened his eyes. He sat up like death-given bones, pulling breathing tubes from his mouth and flexing fingers that crackled from frost. Muscles like cables stretched beneath pale skin, and his eyes, sunken, rimmed red from cryostasis, snapped toward the open door. He stepped out barefoot, dragging the breath of something old and violent into the cold air. 2 minutes later, a Draxi scout stumbled into the same chamber, scanning left and right. What the hell? That's all he got out before a human hand gripped his throat from behind and slammed him into the wall hard enough to dent the metal. Warden stared at him, head tilted. You talk too much. The Draxi reached for his weapon. Warden didn't give him the chance. The crack echoed through the base like a bone snapped through marble. He didn't stop there. He pulled the Draxi's weapon, twisted it until it whined and sparked, then tossed it aside. He started stripping the armor. Too many limbs. Let's improvise. Moments later, cameras flared to life all over the base. The Draxi command room picked up movement on level 9. It was humanoid. Wearing Draxi armor, but not Draxi. Schraal stared in disbelief. Valrek? The figure waved at the camera, then leaned in close. Static burst across the screen as he whispered directly into the mic. Knock knock. Then the feed cut out. Schraal stepped back. Everyone, fall in. Something is wrong, very wrong. Another soldier grunted. You think it's a human? That's impossible. They're all dead. Schraal didn't answer. His breathing grew shallow. Because a long time ago, before the final battles, before the last Earth front collapsed, there had been rumors. Not of a soldier. Of a weapon. Of a containment emergency so bad that Earth's own high command locked it away in deep cryo instead of killing it. Too dangerous to use. Too dangerous to leave alive. They called it Warden. And if the stories were true, it didn't fight wars. It ended them. Far below, Warden walked the empty halls barefoot, dragging an alien blade behind him. His breath steamed like smoke from a chimney, his heartbeat syncing with the base's flickering lights. As he passed one of the old Earth flags, half burned but still hanging, he paused. Then he smiled. Let's see if extinction's still on the table. Warden moved like a ghost through the corridors, his bare feet leaving wet footprints on the frosted steel. The scavenged Draxi armor clung awkwardly to his frame, too long in the arms, too wide in the chest, but it served its purpose. It gave him access to the alien security systems, just long enough to exploit them. He moved with methodical grace, weapon in hand, eyes scanning every shadow. The base was massive, and most of it was dead, collapsed halls, frozen labs, shattered dormitories, but a few sections still lived in flickers and hums, like dying embers in a fire long since abandoned. On the upper levels, the Draxi squad was scrambling. Schraal stood over the flickering tactical display, his mandibles clicking with agitation. The movement signals from the lower levels were erratic but deliberate. Not a beast. Not a malfunctioning system. Something was stalking them. He's using Valrek's armor, said one of the soldiers, staring at the feed. But that's not Valrek. Schraal turned slowly, voice low and cold. No. It isn't. Another soldier, younger and jittery, adjusted his shoulder rig and tried to laugh it off. Maybe it's one of those human lab clones they left down here. You know, half-brained and drooling. We'll torch it in 5 seconds. Schraal didn't reply. He remembered the stories, classified war briefings from his academy days, warnings passed from officer to officer like cursed knowledge. The humans had experimented with something during the final years of their collapse. Not genetic weapons, not AI, but a soldier. One. A singular asset that didn't follow orders. It followed instinct. And that instinct was death. Warden, Schraal muttered under his breath, as if saying it might make it less real. Deep below, Warden stepped into a shattered command room. The glass from the overhead lights crunched beneath his feet. The air was so cold it burned his lungs, but he didn't care. He dragged a Draxi corpse into the room behind him, dumped it on a control panel, and leaned over the interface. The alien language wasn't familiar, but the structure was predictable. Most military code was. He smirked as the lights above the panel blinked from red to green. Access granted? Idiots brought me their keys, he muttered. He began unlocking doors across the base, one at a time, testing their response systems. The Draxi, meanwhile, were reacting, rushing toward every ping, every door creak. He was playing them like strings. They didn't even realize it. Schraal finally had enough. He regrouped his squad in the operations bay, sealing the blast doors behind them. His tone was cold and commanding. "This is not a scavenger. It's not an Earth clone. This is an elite combatant with access to our systems and full mobility in hostile terrain. He has already killed 2 of ours, likely more. We treat him as an enemy war-class target." A soldier in the back scoffed. "War-class? It's just a human." Schraal didn't blink. "I fought humans. They were relentless. Resourceful. Brutal. But this is something different. You ever see a creature smile through a kill?" They went silent. "Then don't underestimate him." The Draxi prepared a trap in the genetics lab, one of the few remaining functional sections of the base. It had sealed environments, override doors, and plenty of power left in its backup systems. Schraal's plan was simple: bait Warden into the lab, trap him inside, and flood the chamber with neurotoxin gas calibrated to the human respiratory system. They even loaded the chamber with mock terminals and flickering lights to mimic high-value intel. Something a human would be drawn to. They didn't realize Warden had already been there. Hours ago. He watched them through the old ventilation feed as they prepped the chamber, laid the canisters, calibrated the fail-safes. One of the Draxi snorted. "If this monkey's as smart as Schraal says, he'll come sniffing. He won't resist a prize." Warden raised an eyebrow and smiled. He didn't take the bait. Instead, he redirected a different section of the base's power grid to the adjacent corridor, triggering an automatic alert in their system. The squad's comms blared a warning. "Containment breach in Lab Hall C," which sent 3 soldiers racing to check it. The remaining 3 waited in the gas chamber, weapons drawn, breathing steady. Then the lights went out. Total black. Seconds later, the power surged back, too fast. Schraal's instincts screamed. "It's a loop!" Before anyone could react, the external lab doors slammed shut, not on Warden, but on the 3 soldiers inside the chamber. Their own traps sealed on them. Then the neurotoxin canisters fired. The screams lasted less than a minute. Schraal and the others pounded on the glass from the outside, helpless. Through the swirling green fog, they saw nothing but shadows, until Warden stepped into the gas-filled chamber. He stared at them through the glass, gave a mock salute, and vanished into the smoke. Schraal's mandibles twitched with rage. He turned to the remaining soldier, Heck, the biggest of them. "New plan. Full lockdown. We purge the reactor and bury this facility. I want that thing gone, along with this cursed ice rock." Elsewhere in the base, Warden leaned against the wall, catching his breath. His chest still ached from the cryosleep, muscles stiff in ways he hadn't expected. He wasn't at full strength yet, but it didn't matter. They were rattled. Scared. And scared soldiers made mistakes. A flicker caught his eye. An old access panel, still operational. He knelt and popped it open, revealing a maintenance drone, long dormant but intact. Its interface pinged once, then blinked alive. Warden grinned. "Hey there, little guy. Still got a pulse?" He rerouted the drone's feed into the base's surveillance hub, giving him full eyes on the Draxi squad. Every hallway, every camera, every infrared pulse. The whole facility was his playground. "Let's keep the party going." Schraal and Heck activated the reactor's overload sequence, a failsafe meant to incinerate the base from the inside out. It would take 30 minutes to reach critical, and there was no shutdown once it began. The goal wasn't escape anymore. It was annihilation. If they couldn't beat Warden, they'd bury him in a nuclear snowstorm. Warden watched the countdown tick across a screen. He didn't look worried. He picked up the stolen alien blade, checked its charge, and smiled. "Good. I hate leftovers." And then he vanished into the shadows again, while the Draxi, unaware, marched toward their own doom. The emergency lights pulsed like a heartbeat now, dim red strobes casting the hallways in hellish shadows as the reactor countdown ticked toward critical. The facility groaned under its own weight, ancient supports straining from the rising heat beneath the snow-packed mountain. The base was dying, and the Draxi inside knew it. Schraal barked movement orders through grit teeth, sweat collecting beneath his armored cowl. The temperature was climbing fast. Heck stomped beside him, massive and angry, scanning each corner with a twitching weapon. Every hiss of steam and groan of steel made his trigger finger twitch. They were no longer hunting Warden. They were fleeing him. And failing. Schraal directed them toward the old extraction bay. If they could reach the secondary hangar, perhaps they could escape before the explosion. Their shuttle was gone. Automated protocols had sent it skyward after detecting reactor instability. That left only one option, the emergency drop ship. No shielding, barely space for two, but better than being cooked alive. As they moved, every flicker of motion played on their nerves. At one turn, a hanging cable swayed slightly. Heck fired at it without thinking. It snapped back, sparking against the wall. Schraal didn't even reprimand him. The line between rational thinking and raw panic had been crossed long ago. Elsewhere in the base, Warden moved like a wraith. The armor he'd taken was partially fried now, too damaged to provide stealth, but he didn't need it. The base was his weapon. He had already mapped every functional corridor, every blast door, every alternate route. The stolen maintenance drone hummed quietly behind him like a loyal pet, projecting a shifting layout onto the wall every 20 seconds. He was 5 steps ahead of them at all times. He wasn't chasing them. He was hurting them. As Schraal and Heck turned another corner, the floor beneath Heck groaned. He paused. Schraal raised a hand too late. The panel collapsed, and Heck plunged straight down into the darkness. The sound he made when he landed echoed through the duct system, a bone-splitting thud followed by a rattling groan. Schraal peered over the edge, saw Heck trying to rise, one arm clearly broken. Before he could even speak, the shadows below shifted. Something moved toward Heck from behind. Heck tried to stand, screaming something unintelligible in Draxi, firing blindly behind him. Sparks erupted from the walls. Schraal could do nothing. He watched as the firelight flickered across Warden's face, calm, expressionless, almost bored. Then the feed from Schraal's visor cut out. The screams stopped. Only silence. Schraal stepped back from the edge, breathing hard. His vision blurred for a second. He blinked, shook it off. Alone now. The last. He activated every proximity sensor on his suit and rerouted auxiliary power to his weapons. His HUD flickered, strained by the overload. The countdown read 19 minutes. 19 minutes until the entire base became a glowing crater. Warden's voice echoed through the corridor, soft and maddeningly casual. "You know, I always thought aliens would be smarter." Schraal spun, weapons raised, scanning every direction. "You did all the hard work for me," the voice continued. "Brought the ship, unlocked the doors, even started the self-destruct. Very generous." Schraal fired down the hallway, shouting in rage. The walls sparked. A pipe burst. No target. "I'm done playing," Schraal roared. "No," Warden said. "You're not. Not yet." Schraal began retreating toward the emergency bay. He knew the ship required manual override. His biometric tag was the only way to activate the controls. But he could make it. He had to. He ran now, boots slamming against the floor, armor rattling with each stride. Behind him, footsteps echoed. Not rushing. Not frantic. Calm. Measured. Warden didn't run. He didn't need to. Schraal reached the hangar bay doors, slammed his hand on the panel. They groaned, half frozen, then shuddered open. The ship was still there, covered in frost, lights flickering. He sprinted up the ramp, spun around, weapon raised. Nothing. He waited. Breath sharp. Every heartbeat like a drum in his chest. Then something dropped behind him. Not footsteps. Not a voice. Just a soft clink. He turned in time to see a small round object roll across the floor, Alien tech, repurposed. One of their own cryogrenades. Schraal lunged for the door. Too late. The grenade burst in a flash of white vapor, and the temperature in the room dropped 50 degrees in seconds. Ice crystals formed on the walls, on his armor, in his lungs. He staggered, weapon raised, blinking through the freezing fog. A shadow moved toward him. He fired. Missed. Then a hand caught his throat. Warden emerged from the mist, armor stripped to bare skin, eyes black with cold and fury. Schraal struggled, clawing, choking. "You ever wonder why they called me Warden?" the human whispered. Schraal tried to answer. He couldn't breathe. "It's not because I protect things," Warden said, leaning in, voice like steel dragging on bone. "It's because I don't let anything out." He dropped Schraal's limp body to the floor, dragged him over to the pilot console, and pressed the alien's palm to the biometric reader. The ship blinked online. Systems active. He stepped back and looked around. He didn't want the base. He didn't need revenge. He needed a ride. Back in the reactor core, the countdown reached 7 minutes. The walls of the facility glowed faintly now, heat rippling through the structure like a beast waking from a long nap. Warden strode up the ramp and into the pilot's seat. He patched into the alien comms system and opened a channel. A high command frequency. Someone would be listening. They always were. "Draxi Prime," he said clearly. "Your squad failed. Your tech is trash. Your arrogance is amusing." He paused. "Send more next time. I'm just getting started." Then he hit launch. The ship screamed upward through the melting ice, past the crumbling tower, into the blackened sky above. The mountain behind him shook. And then, in one massive eruption of white fire and collapsing snow, the base was gone. Vaporized. Erased. Warden didn't look back. As he rose into orbit, the stars lit up around him. A galaxy of possibilities. He leaned back in the pilot's seat, pulled a thin cable from his wrist, and plugged it into the alien console. The drone he'd hacked earlier fed him their navigation data, their systems, their vulnerabilities. He saw fleets. He saw colonies. He saw weaknesses. He smiled for the first time since waking up. "I'm not the last human," he whispered. "I'm just the first problem." The alien war room on Draxi Prime was a cathedral of silence. High-ranking commanders lined the circular chamber, their scaled skin pale under the flickering blue lights of the holographic projection. A dozen screens hovered in the air, playing scrambled footage recovered from the last moments of the North Star base. Most were filled with static and fire. One feed, partially corrupted, showed a shadowed figure moving through thick mist, dragging something heavy. Another showed a brief glimpse of a face. Human. Unarmored. Calm. The transmission cut out right after. The silence broke with the click of claws against stone as Commander Gresh stepped forward, his voice gravel over broken glass. He gestured at the projection with a tired claw. "That," he said slowly, "is not a scavenger. That is not an error. That is a message." The others murmured. Some with disbelief, others with fear they would never voice aloud. The idea that a single human had wiped out an elite Draxi squad, stolen a ship, and escaped a nuclear purge was so ridiculous it defied logic. And yet here they were, watching his silhouette calmly walk toward a launch bay moments before the entire mountain exploded behind him. The AI decoded the last message, played it once more through the chamber. "Send more next time. I'm just getting started." The room went cold despite the ambient heat. Gresh looked toward the intelligence minister, who shifted uneasily under his gaze. "You told us they were extinct," Gresh said. "They are," the minister replied. "We wiped them out a decade ago. Every city. Every last facility. That base was a dead shell." Gresh's eyes narrowed. "Then explain him." The minister's jaw twitched. He turned toward the data scroll on his console, reluctantly accessing a file labeled Red Directive, sealed since the last year of the human conflict. The file opened with a single name, Warden. A series of redacted paragraphs blinked across the screen, nearly unreadable. But what wasn't censored made several commanders visibly flinch. He wasn't part of the army. He wasn't even listed in their standard tactical registry. The humans had classified him as a black asset. An unkillable, unpredictable variable stored in cryostasis only after it became clear they couldn't control him. He wasn't their soldier. He was their failsafe. Or perhaps their punishment. He wasn't supposed to wake up, the minister admitted. Even the humans didn't want him loose. Commander Gresh turned off the screen and walked back toward the center of the room. His claws tapped against the metal floor as he thought. Do we know where he's going? The minister hesitated. No. His trajectory was random. He may be heading into deep space. He's not, Gresh said. He left us a message. That means he's coming here. Or worse, he's already on his way. Elsewhere, far beyond the reach of Draxi sensors, Warden sat in the co-pilot seat of the stolen shuttle, one leg propped on the console, chewing on a pack of dried alien rations like it was old Earth jerky. The ship hummed quietly, running off a hack navigation loop designed to keep it off any known star lane. The maintenance drone hovered near his shoulder, projecting a flickering galactic map filled with data from the stolen Draxi systems. He leaned forward, tapping one of the systems highlighted in red. Military shipyard, the drone translated. Orbiting moon of Draxi Beta. High security. Warden smiled without teeth. Too loud, he muttered. I want something quieter. He flipped through the systems until he stopped on a planet labeled Tresh Vun, a communication outpost. Smaller. Less guarded. But crucial. From there, he could send signals across the Draxi command chain, hijack transmissions, even slip messages into their tactical relay. If they were going to panic, he wanted front row seats. The ship dropped out of stealth warp above the dusty red planet, and Warden slid back into the pilot seat. The stolen codes still worked. He sent a simple clearance ping to the orbiting beacon. It responded with an automatic entry authorization. No questions asked? They hadn't even changed the codes. Sloppy. The landing was smooth, the terrain dusty and cracked from decades of thermal erosion. A small garrison of Draxi technicians walked between spires and relay towers, unaware of the ghost descending from orbit. The ship's hatch opened with a low hiss. Warden stepped out, armor half-gutted, weapon already charged. He walked through the outpost like death on a lunch break. The first guard barely turned before Warden crushed his throat with the butt of the rifle. The second got off a scream before the echo of gunfire silenced him. Within minutes, the outpost was silent. Only the hum of the satellite dishes remained. Inside the central tower, Warden accessed the relay console, reconfiguring the signal protocols using the maintenance drone's help. Soon, the primary transmission burst reached every Draxi command node within range. The message was short. Clear. Your future just woke up. Then he sent another. A loop signal, repeating to every minor colony and ship within the sector. It was a feed of the last 5 minutes of the North Star base. Every kill. Every scream. Every shadow of Warden moving through the ice and smoke. He let it loop. Back on Draxi Prime, alarms screamed through every military corridor. Dozens of ships scrambled from their hangars. Panic burned through the system faster than logic. Some wanted to retaliate. Others wanted to seal off borders. None of them agreed on a plan. But Warden had no interest in fighting a war. He just wanted them to feel what Earth felt in its final days. He launched from Tresh Vun before the emergency forces arrived. The ship warped again, leaving behind nothing but echoes. A trail of ghost transmissions. All leading back to one name. The Draxi High Command held an emergency summit. No consensus. No calm. Just fear. And in a quiet ship, drifting through star-choked darkness, Warden sat in silence. The drone buzzed softly near his arm, scanning incoming signals. One in particular made him pause. An old human distress frequency, looping from deep space. Coordinates burned across the console. He read them once. Then again. The message wasn't random. It was calling him. He leaned forward and narrowed his eyes. So he wasn't the only one. He smiled slowly, the expression tired but filled with something else. Not hope. Not excitement. Purpose. He reached out and adjusted course. If the galaxy thought one human was a problem, they weren't ready for what came next. The stars shifted around the ship as it surged forward, leaving silence in its wake. Behind him, fear bloomed like wildfire. Warden had awakened. And the galaxy was now on borrowed time. The ship drifted through the black like a phantom, invisible to every tracking system and sensor the Draxi Empire relied on. Warden sat still in the pilot's seat, eyes locked on the incoming pulse that had disrupted every carefully laid plan he'd begun to set in motion. It wasn't just a distress beacon. It wasn't a scream for help. It was encrypted, layered, ancient, and human. More than that, it was targeted. The code inside the signal wasn't just Earth tech. It was personal. Whoever sent it knew about Cryopod X7. They knew what it contained. The beacon was broadcasting a call sign from the ghost of a program humanity had buried before their collapse. It blinked again across the console, in pulsing red glyphs. Fenrir. He hadn't heard that name since before the lockdown. Before they froze him in the tomb of that Snowbound base. Before Earth decided that monsters of war were better left in ice than on battlefields. Warden leaned back in the seat, the silence pressing in around him. His fingers hovered over the course adjuster for a few seconds, then changed trajectory without a word. The ship curved through a dust-choked nebula and angled downward toward a dying star system with one remaining planet, small, forgotten, its orbit degrading. That's where the signal came from. A former outpost, long off any empire's map. He didn't expect a trap. If this was Draxi bait, it was far too well disguised. No. This was someone, or something, left behind, just like him. When the ship dropped out of warp, the planet came into view like a wound in the sky. Scorched deserts blanketed its surface, interrupted by jagged spires of old steel towers now broken and half buried in sand. The signal came from beneath one of those towers. A collapsed dome that had once been a military shelter. The ship coasted low, stirring red dust as it settled. Warden stepped out, weapon in hand, eyes scanning the heat-hazed horizon. Nothing moved. No drones. No sentries. Just silence and the dry sound of wind grinding across metal. He moved with the same quiet confidence that had turned him into a nightmare. Every step took him deeper into the buried station, where scorched walls showed signs of heavy blast marks and decades-old blood. The door to the inner chamber was sealed, welded shut from the inside. A half-faded human emblem was still visible above the arched Project Fenrir. One of the last deep black military programs. Warden reached into a small compartment on his belt and pulled out the multi-tool he'd taken from the Draxi ship, slicing through the metal like butter. The door hissed and folded in, revealing darkness beyond. Then came the sound. A slow, mechanical inhale. A breath. Inside the chamber was another cryopod. Cracked. Not ruined. The life support readout blinked in green pulses. Not dead. Not frozen. Held. The pod's outer layer shimmered with old shielding tech that was decades ahead of what he remembered Earth having. And beside it stood an artificial intelligence interface, offline but reparable. Warden moved to the console and powered it manually. It sputtered to life with a flicker of static and a voice layered in synthetic calm. Identity recognized. Warden. Protocol unlocked. Fenrir status, active. Awaiting command authorization. The voice wasn't a surprise. What stunned him was the file that followed. Fenrir wasn't a weapon like him. Fenrir was a team. 4 individuals chosen under the same criteria Warden had barely passed. No loyalties. No limits. Absolute success or absolute erasure. Where he had been placed in cryo alone, they had been deployed. And then, apparently forgotten. Until now. He accessed the AI's core files. 3 of the team were confirmed Kia. 1 remained unaccounted for, last signal from this base, 17 years ago. The pod before him showed stabilized vitals. Warden stepped forward, eyes narrowing as he brushed away the dust on the pod's surface. Inside was a woman, maybe early 30s when frozen, hair shaved short, muscles coiled under a tightly fitted cryosuit. Her face was calm, no signs of trauma or decay. Whoever she was, she'd been waiting a long time. He pressed the override. The pod hissed and groaned as long-dead hydraulics fought to operate. Steam flooded the chamber, and the lights flickered. Her eyes snapped open. She didn't scream. She didn't even flinch. She sat up, exhaled, then turned to look at him with sharp, assessing eyes. Her voice was gravel, slow from disuse. "You're late." Warden smirked. "Traffic." She climbed out of the pod without help, her joints cracking as she stretched. She didn't ask who he was. She already knew. "Where are the others?" she asked. "Dead," he replied. "Everyone's dead. Earth's gone. Draxi took it all." She processed that in a heartbeat, then looked around the ruined chamber. Her jaw clenched, but she didn't ask for details. Instead, she said one word. "How many did you take with you?" 6. She nodded. "Not bad. We'll need more." Warden turned to the console again, rebooting the AI's satellite systems. The maintenance drone buzzed into the chamber behind him, scanning the updated feeds. "They think they've won," he said. She picked up one of the old rifles still leaning against the wall, checked it, then tossed it aside. "Useless. They've gotten lazy. They don't even believe in ghosts," he added. She smiled, the expression sharp and cold. "Let's become nightmares." The two of them stepped out of the bunker into the desert sun. Above, the ship waited, engines humming low. Before climbing the ramp, Warden glanced back at the broken base, now lifeless once more. He wasn't sure how many more of them were out there, other buried monsters Earth had created in its desperation. But now he knew he wasn't alone. And if even one more was out there, hidden beneath collapsed ruins or burned-out stations, they were worth finding. He uploaded a new signal into the satellite relay before departure. It was an old Earth frequency, coded and disguised. A wake-up call. "All assets. If you are hearing this, the war is not over. Come home." As the ship rose into the sky again, its shadow disappeared into the clouds of red dust. From orbit, the world below shrank, forgotten once more. But this time, it had released something. Two somethings. And they were headed straight into the heart of the empire that had once called them obsolete. Warden sat back in the co-pilot's seat. The woman, Fenrir, adjusted her harness beside him. Either of them spoke as the starfield opened in front of them. After a long silence, she asked, not looking at him. "What's the plan?" He answered without hesitation. "We burn everything they built. And then we remind them why they were right to fear us." The ship jumped to light speed, leaving behind only static and a message that would soon echo across every Draxi system. "We are awake. And extinction goes both ways."